Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our mini lecture today, Multi-Generational Workforce, the Challenges and the Gifts. Just give us a moment. We're going to wait for the rest of our attendees to kind of funnel in here, and we'll just get started shortly here in a minute. And thank you all for attending this afternoon. And again, if you're just funneling in, again, welcome to our mini lecture this afternoon. We appreciate all of you coming. We're just waiting a few minutes for all of our attendees to get here, and we'll just be getting started shortly. So again, thank you. And again, I want to thank everyone for attending here this afternoon. We're still waiting on some folks to continue to kind of come into the mini lecture this afternoon. So just kind of hang tight. We'll be starting here shortly. Thank you again. Okay, everyone. Just before we get started for this afternoon's mini lecture, we're just waiting for our lecturer here, and we'll be getting started shortly. But before we do that, I am going to share some information here. I'm going to jump towards the end of our presentation. Want to talk a little bit about our masters, our online masters in management, and our online masters in organizational leadership programs. Or which are two programs that really tie directly in to a lot of what will be talked about today during our lecture. The program format for our online programs, we're 100% online, and we conduct them completely asynchronously. There are weekly optional synchronous courses, so you do have opportunities to kind of meet your peers, ask questions, and really interact with the rest of your cohort. The programs are both 4 consecutive semesters, so 16 total months in all with our programs. We also have optional 3-day in-person sessions. There are 8 total courses for our programs, and up to 50% merit-based scholarships are available to students who are applicants in our program. The online Masters in Management curriculum you'll see here, again, it's 4 semesters, 2 courses per semester. So this gives you an idea of the courses that you would be taking during that time. And of course, some of the application requirements, if you were interested in our master's or the management program, we are required a bachelor's degree from an accredited institution. For applicants who are in your final semester of their bachelor's degree program, you are also eligible to apply. However, we will need your official transcripts with final degree conferral date upon admission to the program. So you can still apply while you're in your final semester. We would just need those final transcripts at the end. We would need a copy of your resume or your CV. And for our management program, about 0 to 5 years of professional experience is what we're looking for applicants in these programs. We do require 3 letters of recommendation. We do ask that they're folks who can speak to your kind of academic and your work ability. We do require a personal statement as well. That personal statement really just going to be talking about kind of why Brown, why now, why this program, and why is this program the one for you. And then, of course, we're going to need transcripts from all colleges or universities that you had attended. For international students, that's going to require either a WES, SpanTran, or ECE, which is required for all international transcripts. There is a $100 application fee, but applicants who submit prior to the application priority deadline, which in this case is September 15th, you'll see on the bottom of the screen there, they'll have their application fee automatically waived. And for international applicants, all applicants whose native language is not English, you must submit the official TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language, or the IELTS score as well. And then for our Masters in Organizational Leadership program, we want to show you the curriculum for that as well. And again, you'll see same thing, 4 semesters, two courses a semester there. So these are the courses that you'd be taking in that program. And then the application process for the Masters in Organizational Leadership, same thing, you're going to need a bachelor's degree from an accredited institution. We do require a minimum of 3 years professional experience, so that is a little different. The other program, you could still apply before you've kind of gone out into the professional world, whereas this program, we are looking for 3 years of professional required experience. Similarly, we're going to ask for 3 letters of recommendation, the personal statement, as well as the transcripts. And again, same for international students. We're going to need your WES, your SpanTran, or your ECE. The application fee, application deadline for priority is the same as well. That's going to be September 15th to have that application fee automatically waived. And again, any international students, we're going to ask that you also submit your TOEFL score as well if your native language is not English. And then just some important deadlines and upcoming dates. So if you're interested in applying for our Spring 26 start, that priority deadline is going to be September 15th. So that is coming up here in the next 2 weeks. And the final deadline to apply would be October 15th, and the semester begins January 21st of 2026. And then if you're interested in a fall start, that application is going to open on October 15th. Our early action deadline is March 15th. The priority deadline for fall will be May 15th, with the final deadline being June 15th. And then lastly, our semester begins on September 3rd. If you do have any questions about that, please reach out to us and let us know. We're happy to answer questions you have about the application process. If you want more information about these programs, we're here to assist you. Again, my name is Michael McGurl, and I work as the admissions coordinator for these programs. So we'll be working very closely should you be an applicant in these different programs. Okay. I want to apologize for the delay here. We're having some issues having our lecturer, Professor Robin Rose, arrive. So as soon as she is in and ready, we're going to get started. Okay, great. It looks like Robin is here. So again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our mini lecture here on a multi-generational workforce, the challenges and the gifts. Your presenters today, again, I already introduced myself, but I'm Michael McGurl. I'm the admissions coordinator for our online program, specifically for our MIM and MOL programs, our Masters in Management and Masters in Organizational Leadership. And then joining us today is our lecturer, Professor Robin Rose, Associate Professor of the Practice of Leadership in the School of Professional Studies.
So glad to be with all of you. Sorry, there was a little bit of a delay there, little technical challenges, but we're here now. We can go to the next slide, Mike. So I got interested in the whole concept of a multi-generational workforce at 2 different times in my life. My first senior level position at Brown was when I was 39. I was the youngest person on the president's cabinet. And I certainly had some experiences where I felt like my age was not an asset, let me put it that way. And that I had to work harder to prove myself. And then, I'm now 72, so I'm on the other end of the spectrum, still working at Brown. They haven't kicked me out yet. And so I had two chapters in my life where I was really interested in, like, wow, is how is my age a factor in how seriously people are taking me, and what kind of assumptions are people making about me based on age at both ends of that professional continuum. It wasn't just a personal interest, it was a professional interest. As our workforce has become more diverse in many ways, it's also become more diverse from a generational point of view. So I got interested in, like, well, what does the research tell us? How much can we trust the research? And how does that line up with my personal and professional experience? So in the short time that we have today, and Mike, if you could give me a 5-minute warning when you want me to stop, that would be really helpful. The questions that I think about are the following. What makes it difficult to talk about generational differences? What does the research tell us? And as a skeptic academic, I'm always like, well, how solid is the research? How might we deal with the differences that do come up, and deal with them in creative and inclusive ways? And what are the implications for all of us as leaders? So as we go through this, I want you to be thinking about your own sort of generational identity and how that impacts your day-to-day experience as a worker, as somebody who's employed. And how does it show up in your relationships with people that you are trying to influence, or people you're you're responsible for supervising? So let's go to the next slide, Mike. And we can go to the next one. All right, so a couple of cautions on caveats. I do believe that, not just based on the research, but based on my own observational data, that when we grew up, the time frame that we grew up in can impact how we show up at work, right? So I do believe that that's true. I do believe that ageism, whether it's intentional or unintentional, impacts all of us, either when we're at the younger end or early end of our professional journey, or as we get older. And the other thing I absolutely believe is that assumptions and stereotypes, whether they're about age or gender or race or ethnicity or religion, whatever, in general, assumptions and stereotypes are not helpful. And what's important as leaders, and this is something that you will explore in this program, is that stereotypes or assumptions that you hold then become blind spots. And if we want to be inclusive to everybody who's showing up at work, we have to sort of challenge ourselves to be thoughtful about what assumptions am I making about this person based on very limited information or based on my life experience. Let's go to the next slide, Mike. And so, as a consequence of all that, I mean, we need to stop dismissing others based on age, because when we make limiting assumptions, we're actually we can be depriving ourselves of really valuable experience. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I still do a lot of work with undergrads who basically are running an outdoor leadership program. I directed that program for 15 years, and then I work as a yeah, I would say an important volunteer. And it's really easy after 37 years of being connected with that program, that when students have a suggestion of how we can do it better, it's easy sometimes for me to jump to the conclusion, oh, that won't work. We tried that before, et cetera, et cetera. When I do that, I'm not listening carefully often. I'm sometimes not listening carefully enough, because they do have a new perspective and they're working with a new generation. And so the assumption that I make that, oh, that will never work because maybe it didn't work 25 years ago, doesn't mean that it won't work now. So we need to stop dismissing the ideas and the input of other people based on age, including, ideas and input of people who have, a vast amount of experience. Another sort of caution that I would say about all of this is that in general, we are more alike than different. We are more alike, and that everyone in the workforce wants to be respected. They want to have a sense that the workplace is fair. They might not like everything that happens, but do they have a perception that things are fair? And generally, people want to work someplace where there is a clear purpose. And finally, with all of this, respectful curiosity and listening is absolutely essential. And it's sort of such an obvious statement that you probably are thinking, well, duh, of course those things are important. But actually, I want to challenge you today, and I always challenge my students to think about how well are you listening really? How well are you listening really? Or are you listening to disagree? Are you listening to find fault? Or are you listening to understand? So I challenge you with that. Let's move on, Mike. So some definitions. There are very few traditionalists still in the workforce. I mean, I think very few, because they're from 1922 to 1945. Baby boomers, we were the dominant force for a very long time. I'll show you some statistics in a minute. We are shrinking. We are a generation that's shrinking in the workforce. And I'll say more about each of these generations in just a second. Generation X, 1965 to 1980. So look at this and figure out, where are you in the mix? Where are you in the mix? And I'm going to challenge you to think about, like, how does when you grew up affect, again, how you show up or how other people show up, right? When we're looking at Generation X, one of the things that they kind of reacted to is that baby boomers tended to be like workaholics. And Generation X, one of their reactions was to try to place a higher value on work-life balance. Millennials came into the workforce pretty savvy about technology, but Generation Z is like, they're a million miles ahead of me in terms of technology, and highly adaptable when it comes to the use of technology. And some of this may show up in differences as people try to grapple with what's happening with AI. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now we can begin to see, the breakdown of generations on a national level. This may vary depending on where you are or the kind of work that you're doing, but you can see that baby boomers are shrinking in terms of their representation, and Generation X and millennials are really taking up, a big chunk. They represent a big chunk of the workforce. And Gen Z, as they graduate from college or whatever their early education is a growing force, but still relatively small compared to the others. Let's move on. Okay, so I want to just take a break for a second and ask you to put some responses in the chat. And you can take either question here. Question one, what might make it difficult for people to have a conversation about generational differences in the workforce? I've worked with some offices and teams where, wow, there's a lot of discomfort or ambivalence about even acknowledging these differences. So you could think about that and put a response in the chat, or pick the second question: what assumptions are often made about people of different ages? And you can include your own personal experience. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and let's just take a second to put some reactions to one or both of those questions in the chat, if you would. Are people still out there, Mike? We still have people here?
We do. So if anyone wants to kind of
Okay.
put in some answers there, we'd love to read them off.
Yeah.
It looks like we have,
Communication
yep.
might be difficult, styles and preferences. Yeah, not just to Morgan, but to anybody. Like, what kinds of preferences based on generational differences might show up at work? Assumptions made about beliefs and perspectives. let's back up a little bit here. Yeah, the younger generation doesn't have a strong work ethic. I've heard that. I've heard that. I don't know if that's fair or not, but I see that unconscious biases might make it difficult for, yeah, right. So we're not even aware of the biases that we have. Texting and emails versus verbal. Yeah, I'll give you a great example of that. We'll keep going, and then I'm going to respond to some of these comments. Yeah, Sharon, assumptions might be made about how conservative someone is based on age. Yeah, that's true, I think. Assumptions made about beliefs and perspectives, those assumptions always get us in trouble. Oh, an assumption, older people aren't good with change. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. Yeah, misconstruing technological fluency with critical thinking. It seems the bubbles created by tech booms are quick to be appropriated by those eager to, still not asking the bigger question of how to ethically you're right, really important question. That's the kind of question that you will grapple with. I'm confident you will grapple with in this program. Um, um, Assumptions I hear often is that I'm very mature for my age in the workplace. Yeah, and I wonder how that lands, you're mature for your age. Or I get it at the other end. You're pretty, I don't know if the word's hip, but you're pretty with it for somebody who's 72. And partly I want to take it as a compliment, and partly I want to say, well, what did you expect? The workforce does not encourage conversation about these things. Yeah, I think that that's true. I have found it easy to have the conversation in two scenarios. One is when you are speaking with an individual with whom you have a good relationship, okay, where you can kind of joke about these things and explore these things. Um, Somebody wrote earlier in the chat about preferences for verbal versus like email or text. Got a great example of that. I said to one of my nephews, I have multiple nephews and nieces, and I said to one of my nephews, I'm really sad that we don't talk anymore. And he's 30, and he looked at me and he said, Robin, I text you all the time. So Gabe's version of talking is text. My version of talking is pick up the damn phone. I want to hear your voice, right? So that's where one of the places where these differences um, uh, come out. I'm looking back through, yeah, as a millennial, I'm used to being perceived as new and young in the workforce. However, I'm now approaching 40. The perception is gradually, yeah, it's an ongoing bias. Isn't it interesting how people sort of get locked into thinking about you in a particular way? And it takes a while, sometimes too long, actually, for that perception to change. Yeah, a lot of good comments here. I was going to say the two ways that I have found that are most impactful in terms of talking about these differences are in one-on-one conversations with people where I think I'm showing up as being respectfully curious. So for instance, if I use a word, I teach graduate students who are getting an MPH in getting Masters in Public Health. And there are times when I will use a word or a phrase and I can tell immediately it's not landing. They look at me with this blank look like, what planet did you just fall off of? And I stop in those moments and say, okay, what just happened? What word or phrase would you use to describe XYZ? And then of course I have to explain, what my language meant. So one-on-one or in small groups, or I do workshops. I'm not looking for work, by the way, but I do workshops with groups of employees and organizations where my job is to stimulate the conversation and try to make it as easy as possible for people to write things and submit them anonymously so that they can have an honest conversation and feel like there's a little less risk in it. Let's move on. There's some really good comments in here. And yeah, one more I want to pick up. Young workforces are either unexperienced or immature. Boy, do we waste talent when we make assumptions that young people don't have anything to offer. Because they do. They're teaching us stuff all the time, and they have some limits. All right, how am I doing on time, Mike? Because how much more time do I have?
You're doing very well, Robin. We have around 20, 25 minutes left.
Okay, great. So I want to hit very briefly some descriptors of each of these generational cohorts. And again, with the caveat that these are big generalizations. They're based on research that looks at how do people from different age groups show up at work, what do they value at work, etc. And baby boomers, probably because of some of the various economic challenges we've gone through, certainly place a high value on job security. Not that other people don't, but this was so important to people of my age group that oftentimes we stayed in a job for a really long time, maybe longer than we should have, because we like the security of a longevity in a job. Very loyal to companies or organizations, strong work ethic, maybe strong work ethic to a point where our work-life balance wasn't so great, which then I think the next generation reacted to. We grew up, those of us in this cohort often grew up in families with lots of siblings. And some people think, some of the researchers think that that shows up in in the competitive nature of some baby boomers that, um, because they had to compete for food at the table or popcorn in front of the TV screen or whatever, that the values or priorities around competition may have been more pronounced. Certainly prefer face-to-face interaction or over the phone. That fits me to a T. And what's interesting too is that more baby boomers are postponing retirement. And that's either because they're really invested in their work, they love their work, I'm a perfect example of that, or financially they cannot afford to. So let's go to the next slide. And again, if you are in this particular generation X, 65 to 80, think about what pieces of this might resonate with you. So the descriptors that researchers have identified are independent, entrepreneurial. Oftentimes, folks in this generation, uh, in traditional families, mom, dad kind of set up, mom went back to work, whether that's not as true in baby boomers. And so kids came home and were latchkey kids and, got themselves into the house. There were fewer after school programs. And some people think that that is connected to sort of an independent entrepreneurial spirit. This is a big one, the second one, wanting work-life balance. And the theory there is that that is a top priority for people in Generation X. One, because they might have seen their dads or their moms working like really long hours. And also because this is often, people in this generation are often in what they call the sandwich generation of launching their kids and at the same time taking care of parents. So the pressure to be efficient and to get good work-life balance is pretty strong in this group of people. Comfortable with text and email, more so than the baby boomers. Loyal to the profession, but not necessary to a single organization. Again, big generalizations, but think about, like, in your experience, does this fit for you or fit for people you know who you're working with? Let's move on. Like, millennials, folks born between 81 and 96, ages 28 to 43. So these are people who are, been working for a little bit anyway, maybe 7, 8 years, and or up into their early 40s. So they might be in their second or third job, really trying to build their careers. And what the research tells us is that folks in this cohort are often very oriented towards purpose. They want alignment between their personal values and a cause. They want to work with an organization, but not feel like they're working for an organization. They want and need consistent and direct feedback. So when I was supervising lots of people not so long ago, this third bullet of wanting consistent and direct feedback and structure. And sometimes I felt like, as a boomer, I kind of felt like I couldn't give enough feedback. That the need or the desire for feedback was significant. I was going to say almost insatiable. Um, Thrive on collaboration, kind of low trust in authority. These are people who experienced at a younger age Columbine and 9/11, and Columbine and mass shootings like that, I think, do have a negative impact on, how much can we trust, quote, the grown-ups to take care of us. And so that may show up in people's challenging of authority and not feeling a high level of trust. Very tech savvy, and I said already, work-life balance is really important here for perhaps different reasons than the generation before. Okay, let's go to the last slide, Generation Z. These are, yeah, I don't think you have too many 12-year-olds. If you do, I'd love to hear about it, working for you or with you. But in this generation, and there, some of you in this call, I'm assuming, are in your early 20s. Is that a fair assumption, Mike? Do you think?
Yeah, I know we have a lot of different age students, so I
Yeah.
think we definitely have
So
students from all these generations for
yeah,
sure.
very tech comfortable, super tech comfortable. Oftentimes preferring communication through whether it's Snapchat or texting or WhatsApp or whatever. There are so many different ways to communicate now. I don't even know all of them, but certainly the desire or the preference to use technology to speed up communication. Here's something that's interesting, that if you're part of Generation Z, you are part of the most diverse generation we've seen. That meaning racially, ethnically, religiously, geographically, etc. And that's an interesting thing to chew on when you think about your own leadership abilities and confidence. I would provoke you in a nice way with a question of how comfortable are you in leading or influencing others who come from backgrounds that are different from your own. I know in some circles we're not supposed to talk about this anymore, but the reality is that if you are trying to influence or lead a highly diverse generation of people in the workforce, anything you can do through reading, through workshops, through personal experience to increase your level of competency and confidence in leading and influencing across a wide diversity of people, that is time well spent. And in fact, in this program, there will be attention put on this issue, and with the hope of increasing, again, both your competency and confidence. Wanting security and stability, especially right at the moment when there's a lot of shifts happening in the economy and in organization. I was just hearing a piece this morning on NPR about large companies that are now, instead of merging, are pulling apart, are establishing multiple companies instead of one big one. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. The bottom line is in our economy and in our organizational life. So wanting to have some security and all that is certainly probably true for anybody who's working right now. using multiple devices, multitask. Some people say, and this showed up in the research, that Generation Z may have shorter attention spans because you're on devices a lot of the time and you're multitasking, shifting from one thing to another. One thing to remember is that multitasking works okay when you're doing things that don't require full attention. You can wash the dishes and have a really interesting conversation. But if the more complexity there is in what you're doing and the tasks that you're doing, the less efficient it is. This is what we know in multitasking. So let's go on to the next slides. And one of the things that I've learned as a teacher, and of course I'm not demonstrating that right now in the webinar format, is when I teach, and I do teach some high school students in the summer, I have to be a better teacher. I can't just talk at people. I have to break things up. I have to make it more interactive. I have to keep changing things. And so if you're leading people who are coming from Generation Z, keep things short, keep things moving, keep things interactive. To sort of move towards the ending of this webinar, I want to talk some about strategies that seem to work in leading or influencing multi-generational teams. Number one, let's replace sniping and negative comments at the water cooler, whether that's a virtual water cooler or a real one, to stop the sniping about people who are a different generation from your own, whether that's focused on the younger people with less experience or the older people. It does not help. It does not help the culture of your workforce. And so one thing I would like to challenge you about is that, and it happens, and when you hear it, that hopefully you will find the courage to say, you know what, let's stop doing that. Let's stop doing that. We can express, I'm frustrated. I'm going to pick on Mike. I'm frustrated because Mike only answers my email requests with these very short texts that don't tell me what I need to know. That's different than saying, oh my God, all they want to do is send really short texts with abbreviations I don't understand, blah, 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 blah. So I think a really important strategy for building a respectful culture is to stop some of that sniping that can go on. To hold the generational characteristics lightly, again, we are more the same than we're different. Some organizations have informally and even more formally experimented with reciprocal mentoring, right? So let me give you the older people. It's really easy for us to assume that we know more because we've worked longer. Well, the fact of the matter is we may know some things that you gain through age and experience, but there are other things that have nothing to do with that. Like, I need mentoring. Case in point, getting on this webinar today ended up being a technological challenge for reasons that Mike and Amanda and I couldn't quite figure out. But I sure was grateful for Amanda, who hung in there with me and walked me through whatever was happening on my Zoom today. Was something I'd never seen before. You might think about, in your organization, are there ways that people with different experience levels can mentor each other? Are the people in generations, boomers or Generation X, is there a formal way that they can learn more from people in Generation Z, for instance, and vice versa? Just something to think about. Are there opportunities for young people to lead? One of the most important leadership challenges and tasks for people who are in the mid-career and older is to to mentor and support and coach, and there's a difference between mentoring and coaching, younger people so that they develop the competency and the confidence to lead. Most important contribution that we can give as mentors, as leaders, as supervisors, is to help younger people with less experience develop confidence. So one of the real easy things, well, I don't know if it's not easy, but an important thing that I used to ask people quite often is a simple question. And the question is, what do you think? The easiest thing as a leader is if somebody comes to me with a problem and I give them my answer. My answer may not be the right answer. It might not be the best answer. Sometimes it is. But if I want to develop the cognitive muscle power of somebody who's less experienced than I am, then one of the most important questions I can ask is, what do you think? The other thing, the other direction is as an older person or a more experienced person in the workforce, I have to remember that when somebody from Generation Z or a millennial asks me a question is not always a judgment. Question of, why do we do it this way? Sometimes you catch the tone, well, if somebody says, well, why do you do it that way? That's a different story. But if somebody just asks a question about how did we get to this point? Why do we do it this way? It's really easy to get defensive and judgmental, when in fact somebody may just be asking a question for information. That's true in our relationships, our most intimate relationships. I used to say to my partner, this is a question for information only. There's no judgment in this. Okay? So opportunities for young people to lead, and questions are not always attacks. Here's a big one since post-COVID that I think those of us who have longer longevity in the workforce have had to adapt to. And that is, people are expecting more flexibility in the workplace and how we get work done. And you know what? I mean, as long as there's some accountability, how much does it matter whether somebody's face to face? I'm asking a question now. How much does it really matter whether it's face to face or remote? I think it does. It's different, and there are consequences of both. But I think that the demand from younger people who are entering the workforce post-COVID for more flexibility is really interesting, and it's pushing all of us to think differently about how we work. And I don't think there's a perfect answer or perfect solution. There are things that can happen better face to face, but a lot can happen remotely. And boy, we have learned that in the last couple of years. All right, Mike, let's go on. Some more strategies. I think it's helpful to clarify preferences. If you're leading or influencing a small team and you have multi-generations on that team, I would encourage you to have a conversation about, what people are looking for in terms of communication. This whole thing of, text, Slack, Snapchat, whatever. It's useful to have a conversation. Communication early, often, and in short form. That is what I'm getting from my students who are in their 20s, is they don't want, when they email, they often don't want a long response. They want bullets, they want short form. Transparency is important, flexible workspaces we've talked about. I think that, and I don't know if this is generational. I kind of think it is that people are really focused, especially younger people, I think. They want to hear feedback about their strengths. And sometimes my experience with them is it's a little hard for them to hear the criticisms. And my theory about this is that if people have a full cup, not of like made up stuff, but of authentic, positive appreciation and feedback, positive feedback, that for the most part, they're more capable of hearing some of the criticism. That doesn't apply to everybody, but that's my experience is that that's true with a lot of folks. Okay, and finally, being careful about assumptions. We talked about that. I talked about that earlier. Let's go to the next slide, Mike. So in the chat, I would love to see some comments about what do you think are the implications of these ideas and this data for leaders or people who are trying to influence? What do you think? Let's stop here for a second and give you a chance to put some thoughts in the chat. Okay, work-life balance that you get from remote days. Morgan said she can't see the comments. I don't know why that would be. Different ages have different communication. Let me throw out another question. What do you take away? Let's go to the next slide. What do you take away from my comments and some of the comments in chat? What do you take away, or how might you apply it? Yeah, role of leaders to reach goals, but you have to have different approaches, which is exhausting, but there's a lot of true. Always have to listen to understand. Amen. Amen. Leaders should pause and consider who they're talking to. Amanda's giving some advice about how you see the chat. It's an organically democratic process in which the shoe fits. People want to help our elected roles that best suit their eagerness and capacity. Yeah. Key takeaway, reconfiguring and adapting to change. That's the hard part, isn't it? Tailoring communication, name of the game. Clear communication matters. And I think asking for feedback, let's see, there's strong potential for conflict with team members that have different preferences. Yeah. Working remotely. Yes. Yeah, you're right. This remote thing is often caused conflict at work. Yeah, not seeing the person. Morgan likes that question. And I think asking for feedback. So about 3 times a year, or at least twice, I think it's probably closer to twice, I ask my students mid-year and at the end, because I know that there's like a 50-year difference between where I am and where these students are. That is significant. So I purposely ask them halfway through the year, what can I or should I change up in terms of how I'm teaching that would make this course more accessible and engaging to you? And quite frankly, sometimes they say things that are a little hard for me to hear. But if I don't hear it, if I don't ask for it and I don't hear it, then I'm missing an opportunity to engage with them in ways that are meaningful. And I love them for it, even if it's a little ouch moment. Okay. Like I said earlier, I think that, quote, the short attention span piece has made me a better teacher because I keep things moving and engage them more, which of course you didn't get in this particular format, but when I teach in person or in a different format, lots of engagement. So I think in some ways you have to ask, and this goes back to talking about preferences for communication, asking people, what works for you? What works for you? I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions about what I've talked about or questions for Mike and Amanda about the program that you're considering. Mike, did you get through all of your slides prior to my jumping on?
We did, so thank you for that. And again, if
Okay.
anyone is interested in either of our programs, our Masters in Management or our online Masters in Organizational Leadership, just keep in mind our priority deadline is coming up on September 15th, with the final deadline to apply being October 15th for spring. And for fall, our application opens October 15th. And again, if you have any questions, either for myself or for Professor Rose, please feel free to put them in the chat or in our Q&A function. Yes, and thank you, Amanda. Again, you can reach us at onlinemasters_admissions@brown.edu if you have questions about either the program or the application process.
I'll say one more thing, and that is my hope is that some of my questions or comments provoke your thinking. And a lot of what we do at Brown in all of our educational programs is to find ways to provoke students' thinking. So this was a little taste of that.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you again so much for attending today. Thank you, Professor Rose, for this excellent lecture. I think we all really learned a lot today about this multi-generational leadership topic. So thank you all so much for attending. We will be sending out a link to this recording as well as a link to the slides as well. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Professor Rose, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Mike, can you stay on for a second?
Yeah.